$95,811 in 30 days just with Google Ads alone. That's exactly what we scaled this e-commerce brand right here from the period of November 24th of 2024 to December 23rd of 2024. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly how we made it happen step by step so you can use this formula for your own e-commerce brand. But before any of that, let's first deep dive into the context of this business so you further understand exactly what this brand is all about. First things first, this is an electronic brand selling variety of refurbished products, things such as refurbished iPhones, Android phones, SIM cards, etc. So basically anything and everything to do with mobile devices, this brand sells. And because of this, it came with its own unique kind of approaches and its own unique problems, which majority of the other brands, which are not electronic brands, don't necessarily have to face. However, you can still learn a lot from these problems. First things first, the original strategy for this brand, before we even started working with them under my Google Ads agency or marketing, was a matter of search engine optimization plus partnerships with other influencers, companies, etc. within their niche. So one thing this brand was struggling with heavily before they began working with us was advertising. Simply put, no types of advertising platforms was providing positive results for them. And it kind of made sense for their brand because if you did a quick search on Google for refurbished iPhone 14, 15, 16, etc., what you would find is official brands like T-Mobile, like Verizon, like Sprint, AT&T, etc. actually selling these refurbished products. And because these are such heavy hitters, these are some of the biggest names in the world, it's almost impossible to compete with them directly and sell your own refurbished iPhone or Android device, especially if you don't really have a way to stand out, which is what we struggled with initially for this brand as well. But after we started working together, that's when really results started to come in, and that's when they became a lot more confident to then go all in on Google Ads. But there were a few challenges we had to deal with when it came to this brand initially. First challenge was stock and availability of products. Because they sell refurbished products, it's very easy to go out of stock for any types of iPhone models or Android devices. But one of the biggest challenges we had to face was just the mindset and overall approach of this e-commerce brand owner we were dealing with. Because like I mentioned earlier, they had never gotten results or consistent results from Google, or for that matter, any other advertising platform. So they were very hesitant to go on Google to start spending X amount of dollars, X amount of pounds, because this brand is located within the United Kingdom, but it sells worldwide. The numbers within the Google Ads account are all based on pounds. But eventually we made it work. However, a little bit more business information, the break-even cost per acquisition, which is the main metric we were focusing on for this brand, was 49 pounds. So it was a fairly decent number to work off of. However, because it's such a competitive niche, this was often a number we had a little bit of difficulty reaching, but we did eventually end up meeting that goal. The average monthly revenue prior to us starting work was around 300,000 pounds per month. So this brand was in no way, shape, or form a beginner brand or just starting out. They were a fairly decent sized brand. But the main situation was Google was only accounting for less than 10% of this revenue. The rest, 90% and beyond, was coming from search engine optimization and the partnerships which that involved themselves within. The average order value for this brand was roughly 390 pounds because they sold a wide variety of different products, and the average conversion rate of this website was sitting anywhere between 0.55% to 0.65%, which in the grand scheme of things is not the highest conversion rates in the world. However, it was sufficient to get some decent traction going for this brand. And although they shipped worldwide, their main target market was the United States because that's where majority of the sales were happening anyways. Now, the biggest goal that they had in mind when they began working with us was to reach an overall revenue level of 500,000 pounds per month. Now, this is keeping all of the revenue in mind, not just from Google Ads alone, because as I mentioned earlier, from Google Ads, they were up and down for a very long time with Google, and essentially we began working with them during this phase right here when their results were at an all-time low in October. That's when they approached us, and that's when we started scaling. And before that, actually, these numbers you see here were actually with improper conversion tracking. They were tracking add to carts for the overall conversion value amount. They were also tracking initiated checkouts along with purchases. So that's why the numbers during this time period were so heavily inflated. But that's what we were dealing with during this time. Now, just a little bit more on the number side of things. Basically from November 24th to December 23rd, we can see exactly what ended up happening. And I'm choosing this time period because this is the 30-day period when we were actually scaling this brand. Overall, this brand was sitting at 77,300 pounds in revenue at a 9.30x ROAS. So it was very, very profitable during this time, because keep in mind, cost per acquisition that I wanted to aim at was roughly 49 pounds. We were sitting at 38 pounds for that number, and the ROAS was extremely profitable for them as well. And the only reason why we were able to do this is because of the overall approach we ended up taking with this brand. But before we get into the approach, one thing you want to understand is this brand came with a lot of problems. First major problem, which a lot of other brands, your brand as well, might be facing, is that they had foundational setup issues. This is one of the most common problems I still audit even to this day under my Google Ads agency or marketing with the brands I deal with, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing $1 million a year, you need extra help scaling your brand to the next level, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a free call with me, and let's see if we can potentially work together and make that happen. But conversion tracking issue, number one issue for this brand, resulted in increased levels of conversion value recorded within the Google Ads account, although it was nowhere close to those amounts. Second issue was the campaign strategy itself. Now, if we look at the time period before we began work, which essentially was even before November 24th, we started to work on October 11th. So if we look, for example, from June 1st all the way up to October, maybe even 10th, we can understand what their overall strategy was. First things first, they were heavily reliant on these search campaigns right here. As you can see, they didn't have too much going on in terms of the overall number of campaigns. However, it was mostly search campaigns that they were dealing with. This is simply because they had not found out a way to get their products approved within the Google Merchant Center. The biggest issue for these search campaigns was they were using a strategy which I call the keywords galore strategy, which simply meant there was too much activity in terms of keywords that they had going on and too little movement. Essentially, if we go inside any of their ad groups, they had a bunch of different keywords during that time which they were running and which they were spending money on. So if we look right here, in total they had 101 different keywords within a single ad group. Keep in mind, they also had multiple different ad groups going on at any given time. And in total, for all of their ad groups combined, there were a total of 475 keywords. Now, this is not an ideal approach because this is like a all-in-one approach where you push in a bunch of different keywords, a bunch of different inputs, and you tell Google, hey Google, go out and find something that works for me. And especially if you don't have high enough of a budget to go across all of these 400, 500 keywords, then a lot of things basically remain untested, which is exactly what was happening here. I mean, out of the 14,000 pound total ad spend, 11,000 pounds had gone on one single keyword, which seemed to be getting decent results. However, looking at it a bit deeper, we understood this was a very inflated number. This was nowhere close to what the real number should have been. In fact, the real results for that keyword was around a 2x to a 3x ROAS. But as we see, majority of these other keywords ended up spending basically zero, nothing to get tested, which is not an ideal approach because again, if there's winning keywords in here, there's different winning variations in here, approaches, etc., that never ends up getting tested. So you want to be very careful when launching search campaigns. This is one of their biggest mistakes, which was leading to a very low ad rank. But essentially, along with ad copy and landing page testing, which basically there was a lack of, the search campaign focus was the only focus they were using, and there was no type of shopping feed in place. The feed was completely unoptimized during that time because they didn't know how it worked. So essentially they had left it unoptimized. It was just with a bunch of generic keywords, very simple. Things were not looking too good for this brand initially when it came to the overall setup. But that's where we came in. We started implementing the first portion of the strategy. Now, if you're one of my OG followers, you know we never begin with just the campaigns directly because the easiest way to ruin things is to go in and click a bunch of buttons. So instead, we took a step back and we started to work from the product feed itself. So the first thing we did is started work on the product titles. Again, with such a competitive niche, it doesn't make sense to have product titles which are iPhone 15 refurbished or iPhone 15 brand new blue or something along those lines. So instead, we implemented proper SEO techniques for these product titles and made them slightly bigger because majority of the other brands were also doing this as well, but we wanted to beat them with better copywriting, with better keywords. Now, we didn't really add any types of perceived value to these product titles simply because there's no way you can add perceived value to a refurbished iPhone. You can't really say portable or heavy duty or luxurious. Any of those words don't make sense within this niche, so we refrain from adding perceived value, rather put all our eggs into the SEO side of things. But in addition, we began focusing on the pricing. Now, the beautiful thing about this brand was they had a little bit of leeway when it came to changing around the pricing and just kind of playing around with it. So what we did is, instead of being the most expensive, we opted to be the average of our top 5 competitors. We want to be right smack in the middle when it came to pricing, so we could attract the highest quality of traffic possible. But in addition, we kind of shifted our approach directly from just focusing on these individual campaigns to the overall holistic business approach. Essentially, what that meant was we shifted the focus from the all-in-one approach, going all in on just one type of campaign type or just one type of product, to something along the lines of segregation, where now for any campaign we were launching, and we can see it in action right here within the last 30-day period, even any campaign types we were launching, we were segregating out based on the model itself. So in essence, what we did is we added a few more campaign types. We changed it from 3-4 campaigns to 10 total campaigns. And majority of these, now as you can see, first of all, it's running search campaigns along with shopping, but these are separated out based on the model itself. One goes for iPhone 13, one goes for iPhone 14, 15, etc. And it's the same for the search campaigns. We are no longer going with the all-in-one approach, putting a bunch of keywords inside of one search campaign. Instead, we are opting out to basically segregate things out. And as you can see, the ROAS is much on a higher level. It's much more consistent. And most important of all, if one campaign for whatever reason does bad on one day, that doesn't mean the entire catalog is going to do bad. There's other campaigns advertising other parts of the catalog which still have the ability to do well. That's the biggest benefit for this approach right here, going with a segregated approach. But in addition, for these search ad copies, instead of just keeping one ad copy and just running it because it's the generic one for a generic product like a phone, what we did is we started focusing on taking up as much space on the page as possible. So if you were to, for example, search up on Google iPhone 15 refurbished, now when our search campaign came up, it would take up a lot more space than majority of the other competitors, because our goal here was to stand out by being bigger. That brought us now to the actual campaign strategy. So essentially, when it came to the search campaigns, it was still more on the search heavy side of things, meaning we still had a lot of campaigns which were basically search campaigns. However, we switched the approach from just going after 400 broad match keywords to now a mixture of broad match along with exact match. What we did is we did a bit of digging into the inside section right here to understand which of the previous data points to winning keywords. Even though the data was faulty, we still opted to look at this data to understand which keywords got shown more, which keywords had a higher conversion rate in general, and what we could do to introduce those within our ad copies as well as within the back end. And that's exactly what we did. We ended up basically putting these as exact match keywords within our search campaign and also targeting other similar variations to those. But in addition, we essentially took this approach from the keywords galore approach to the keywords that actually got results from this strategy. And we still wanted to test a bit more things, because again, the main thing that this brand was lacking from the start was proper testing. They were just going all in on search, and even with search, that just one approach that had been running for weeks and months. We took that approach out and we started testing based around product specific search campaigns, and the same thing with standard shopping campaigns. We didn't want to go with performance max, because in this situation, from our basically experience, we found out that performance maximums are overbidding way too high to get a sale, and that was not the approach we wanted to take. So rather, we took the manual bidding approach with standard shopping campaigns with bid restrictions, and we again took the product specific approach with proper segregation. And eventually, once this campaign strategy really started to work during this time, it started to get us some decent results and momentum. And as you can see, the results had kind of died down in the later portion of December, which is for obvious reasons, because Christmas time is almost coming to an end. It's almost New Year's, and this means the sales volume, especially if you don't get it before Christmas, will start to die out. So around this time is when this brand could no longer ship the product and get it delivered before Christmas. So that's why the sales here eventually kind of slowed down. However, they are going to be going back up in January because of the New Year's, and again, just things going back to normal. But essentially, for optimization and scaling, we stuck to the most basic approach possible, because we didn't want to really rock the boat too much in this situation, because there were so many search campaigns and whatnot going on. So what we did is we focused on a lot of keyword exclusions, basically ad copy improvements plus A/B testing of certain keywords, landing pages and getting rid of any types of keywords which were not resulting in any decent revenue or profitability. We focus on feed improvements. We wanted to really get the foundations and fundamental in place for this brand. So we focus on the product titles for shopping, descriptions, as well as Google Merchant Center programs, promotions, etc. Because again, the main goal here was to make the base so strong that no matter what campaign that we launched, it would be profitable essentially. But once things were working, once this approach was getting us some decent traction, the 9x ROAS, then we started increasing budgets every 7 to 14 days by 20-25%, and we started decreasing restrictions because again, anytime you're scaling, anytime things are profitable, you want to give more leeway to the Google Ads algorithm and campaigns to go out and find even a bigger pool of audience and bigger pieces of data and people in general, because you don't want to restrict it if it's doing well. This brought on the expansion approach versus the simplicity based approach, because again, before with the 4 campaign approach this brand originally had, it was way too simple because compared to the niche that this brand was targeting, compared to the product this brand was going after. So we had to essentially expand things a bit more and basically scale it in that way. But the end result from when we started the work, October 11th to December 31st, essentially if we go back, we can see how this brand essentially started doing. So if we look right here, October 11th to December 31st, we can essentially see that this brand in total was able to generate 120,000 pounds in revenue at a 51 pound per conversion. And in addition, we had a return on ad spend of 7.44x. So this was exactly what we wanted to achieve. We wanted to achieve anything above a 6x. And in this situation, we ended up achieving a 7.44x ROAS. So everything ended up scaling very smoothly for this brand. They were able to unlock a brand new ad campaign placement for their niche. But if you run again a brand doing $1 million per year, we can take care of everything Google Ads related for you. So if you want to start working with me potentially or my agency, the link is in the description as well as the comment section. Schedule a free call with me and let's see if we can potentially work together and scale your brand to the very next level.